Hey guys, so we've had about a month of regional level events now post Duelist Nexus, and also at the time of recording, YCS Brazil is still happening, so we do have a pretty good sense of what the top decks are right now. And so as usual, I wanted to outline not only the top decks, but also a cost breakdown of these decks, where I actually went through TCG Player and searched every card, card by card, and listed out the prices, just to help you make informed decisions on, the next deck that you can pursue. And so before we continue, big thanks to my sponsors as usual. Links and discount codes in the description below, and definitely go check out Card Brawlers as well as Tier 0 Games. You can use code Hakuna5 for 5% off on Yu-Gi-Oh! Singles and Seals product, particularly those Mega Tin pre-order singles. Now, as for the top decks, I'm just not going to cover Chimera for this one because, we already know it is the best deck. It has the most number of regional tops so far in this Duelist Nexus format, but realistically, whenever this ban list ends up coming out, hopefully this month, Chimera probably won't be Tier 1 anymore, and realistically, I can't really advise anyone to invest in Chimera right now, considering the impending ban list. So in that case, let's just cover some of the top 5 decks, not exactly in any particular order, but we're going to start with Dragon Link. This regional top-wise, it's actually 5th most top so far. It's still hanging in there, very, very strong. On Dueling Book, not played as much as some of the other meta decks that I'm going to list, but you know what, still a really solid win percentage. Now, technically, this is another deck that could potentially get hit on the ban list as well, just because, it's just been around for so long, but who knows, maybe it will still survive. Now, in terms of the deck list, this is a regional level event, Florida, by Andrew, who finished 5th place actually, and a shout out to Carlancher Store for always providing these amazing visuals. So if you kind of look at the total deck cost, around $330, which is actually pretty good for Dragon Link at this point. For the most part, Bestial Lubellion was really expensive, but now with that Mega Tin reprint coming around the corner, I'm actually using those pre-order prices, which again you can use code Hakuna5 for 5% off on the following stores at Tier 0 Games and Card Brawlers. So it's actually quite affordable, or at least I should say affordable now compared to what it was before. As you can tell, the main and extra deck is where it gets hefty. Side deck, you can always kind of work around that and make it as affordable as you can possibly make it. Now, in terms of what's considered as a deck core, which again, I get it is quite subjective, but I try my best. And so if you sort of look at this, Dragon Link does have quite a big engine count, and they do also have a lot of Bestials, and even then, the deck core is about $140. When I did this, like maybe a couple months ago, the Dragon Link core actually ended up around like $300. So the cost of playing this deck has really slashed a lot. Now, keep in mind with this impending ban list, some of the Bestials might potentially get hit, right? People are predicting Magma to 1. That is something that the OCG has seen. Although Magma Nut is not too expensive, again, especially with that reprint coming in the Mega Tins. Lubellion is definitely another expensive one, and that might also get put to 1, who knows. So it is potentially something to consider if you are looking to pursue this deck for the next format. So next, let's cover Unchained, which has been really perhaps a bit of a surprise in terms of how well it's been doing lately. Regional top-wise, 6th most amount of tops on Dueling Book, also doing quite well and a very strong win percentage. And so this is a list that actually finished 2nd place at Toronto Regionals. This deck profile was actually on my channel through Maslin, so definitely go check that out. And so it's a very strong deck, whether whether it goes 1st or 2nd. I actually recently did a survey breakdown of Unchained players, and they outlined some of the key strengths and weaknesses of the deck, which you can also check out that video. And so it's got a lot of ability to pop and break boards, and of course just something that doesn't really die to like your traditional board breakers. Let's say like Evenly Dark Road, they have ways to play around it essentially. And deck cost wise, this particular list was around $380, which okay is maybe a little bit pricey, but if you can kind of look at the deck list, for example, Potter's Prosperity is definitely something that always beefs up that cost. This is another card that might potentially get hit on the next limited list or ban list. Hopefully it actually gets put to 1 finally, but you know what, so far it's been dodging it, so who knows. But otherwise, it's got a lot of non-engine space as well, and main deck wise it's not too bad. So for example, if you look at the deck core, then you see it's about $150. The Abomination Prison, that spell is actually something that is around like $20+ each. It's a card that hasn't been reprinted in quite some time, I believe, so that's kind of where the main cost is coming from. But honestly, considering how well this deck is doing and considering the amount of non-engine space, stable cards that you probably already have, under $50 is actually not that bad for a meta contender right now. So next, of course, we're going to cover Chimera. There's branded Chimera, there's some runic Chimera as well, but nonetheless, it's been doing really well. Just overall, it's been doing, seeing a ton of play, whether online, regional, top-wise, 4th most amount of tops. I think it kind of slowed down in terms of tops in the last week or so, but definitely showing promise. This is another deck that I actually did a survey on of Chimera players, and they definitely outlined some of the best hand traps and staples, against the strategy as well that you can check out. So this is a list that actually won the Utah regional, and so this one of the things that's known for this deck is that it actually has a lot of non-engine space, which is very vastly different than something like Branded Despia, which is notorious for not having a lot of non-engine space. So, you know, you can fill this deck out with a lot of staples that you probably already have. The deck total-wise, this one in particular, $360. I mean, you look at the side deck though, $100. Most of that is coming from Thrust, so you can just not play Thrust, and it can be rather decently affordable. Even like Crossout and Talons is actually still pretty decently, you know, not expensive, but definitely adds to a significant amount of cost. And so if you kind of look at the quote-unquote deck core, then you do see, again, it's around 144, like everything's sort of around that $150 range so far. Main deck is actually not that bad at all. They're actually quite cheap from Duelist Nexus, for example, and the branded cards, like you probably already have them from the Alba structure decks, for example. But the actual cost comes from like the extra deck, the King of Phantom Beasts. That is actually around like 25 each. Guardian Chimera has spiked a lot lately. It's around like 30 plus each as well. And this is a card that honestly was like $10 with that Maze of Memories reprint when it first came out, you know, that back when Branded Despia was the only one, you know, playing this card for the most part. So it definitely has gone up, but again, $144 for a deck core that is meta is actually not that bad. But of course, keep in mind that, you know, with this impending ban list, you know, will Branded Fusion get put to 1? That will definitely hamper this strategy out as well. You know, their line of play is known to be pretty linear, and so Branded Fusion is also one of their starters, so that is definitely something to consider. So next we have Rescue Ace, which is a deck that, you know, people really kind of predicted it would probably do well coming into this new Duelist Nexus format. But you know what? Lately, I think it's been picking up a lot more regional top 8s. It's actually third most amount of regional tops so far. Been seeing a lot of play online as well and doing pretty well. I also recently did a survey on Rescue Ace players, so you can also check that out in terms of, you know, key strengths and weaknesses of this deck. You know, obviously has the set 4 mechanic is really, really interesting. And lately, they can also, not all of them are playing the Ibly lock, but they can also. The one list that I'm going to show you here does not play the Ibly lock, but if you do play Ibly, one of the benefits of that is, you know, you can kind of protect yourself from like evenly Lightning Storm, as well as even special summons like Kaiju's, because you do need those Rescue Ace monsters on the field for your traps to actually become live. But nonetheless, you know, this is a very strong deck so far. This total cost was $360, but if you kind of look at the list again, it's another deck that plays Prosperity, which really adds to a lot of the cost. The extra deck is actually rather cheap for this deck and is quite flexible. If you were to sort of focus just on the Rescue Ace cards, it's still around $140, and that is because the Hydrant is like $30-40 each, and that's because it came from that Amazing Defender set, I believe, which is also where, you know, we're going to talk about Purrely next soon, and you know, that set was not open that much, so some of the singles in that is very, very expensive. But you know what, not terrible, especially considering how well it's doing in the meta so far. The extra deck, the deck core, was kind of hard to kind of assess. I mean, you know, we only have these 2 cards listed here based on the deck list that we just showed, but you know, I understand that some of the lists also play like the Firewall package, and you could consider that as a deck core, but even if you were to add that, it really doesn't add too much to the cost anyways. Now, speaking of Purrely, we do have that next, and it has the second most amount of regional tops. It did get a lot of buff in the Duelist Nexus set, getting that Purrely Noir. Frequency-wise, in terms of online play on Dueling Book, also seeing a lot of play and doing quite well. And so Purrely has been shown, you know, despite that early ban list hit, it's still sticking around thanks to that new boost. So this is another list from that same Utah regional, around $435. This one was a rather expensive one. Another deck that plays Prosperity, but similar to that Amazing Defender issue, where some of those singles like Purrely, as well as, you know, I think Pretty Memory, I believe, they were like pretty expensive, like at least $20 each. So it definitely can add up in terms of, you know, like you look at the deck core, and the engine is, I guess, kind of big, but this deck can also fit a lot of non-engine. So $163, you know what, it's definitely still gone down since like a little while ago, back when they were also first tier 1 along with like Super Heavy Samurai, for example. So the deck has come a long way. It's shown to be pretty resilient. When I did a survey of the Purrely players, they've really shown how it has like an insane grind game. You know, it's also very good going second as well and being able to break boards. One of the weaknesses though that the players mentioned is that, you know, this deck cannot really OTK very easily, but you know what, at least as long as you can kind of outgrind them, which you probably will, you're probably going to be in a good position, and it's a tier 1 deck for a good reason. So as you would have noticed, some of the common themes among the key top decks that I've listed today is that the deck core actually ended up being around $150 for the most part for all of them, which is actually kind of good to see. When I've been doing this for the last few months, like sometimes you see deck cores as high as something around $300, as I mentioned with like, let's say Dragon Link was at that level, same with like, I believe Branded was also close to there. Chimera, when it was first tier 1, it was actually much higher than that, and it was an insanely expensive deck. So I think it's at least good to see that the deck cores are actually quite, you know, quote unquote affordable from a competitive standpoint, you know, the overall deck cost sure can definitely add up, but you've seen that, you know, even with like $360, like you still have a meta relevant, you know, tier 1 deck that you can play. So definitely a lot of, you know, options for you to pursue this time around with a pretty good amount of fair pricing. At the same time, we do have that ban list coming around the corner, so definitely make sure to try to pick that you feel is the safest option to pursue. And so as always, a huge thanks to all of you for watching this video. Hopefully that was helpful. Again, at the time of recording, YCS Brazil is still ongoing. Who knows if that kind of changes up the market as well as, you know, some of the top decks, but hopefully the result of this video still stands after that event. So a big thanks to my patrons as always for supporting the channel. Really, really appreciate it, and well, take care guys.